Good morning. Welcome to the Right on Crime podcast. My name is Kurt Altman, and I'm your host today. I am the state director for the state of Arizona and New Mexico, and also the director of the Right on Crime Prosecutorial Innovation Program. Today, I have somebody with me. I'm really honored to have him here. According to his website, he's touted for protecting families, giving a voice to victims, and being a conservative prosecutor. Please help me welcome today Eric Zahnd.
Kurt, it's great to be here.
Eric, thanks for coming all the way from Platte County, Missouri.
That's right, part of the Kansas City area.
Kansas City. And Eric, you're the Platte County District Attorney. You were elected in 2002. By my math, which math is hard for lawyers, that's 22 years ago. How many times have you been elected? Five?
Yeah, 6 times now. I'm in my 6th term as prosecutor. It just really is phenomenal. You know, I started off as the youngest prosecuting attorney in a first-class county in Missouri. Now I've been around. I'm the longest elected prosecuting attorney in Platte County history, and also currently the longest-serving prosecutor in the Kansas City Metro. So it's crazy how time changes things.
Man, and time probably flies. You probably feel like it was yesterday.
You know, it's a
elected.
great job. Here's the thing. I feel so fortunate that every single day I get up and go to work to the job that I do, trying to keep our community safe and doing the right thing every day for public safety, for Platte County businesses, for families, for victims of crime, and frankly, also doing the right thing for people who have committed crimes too. Some of those folks who need to go away for a long time, other folks who we can use other interventions, hopefully to redirect their lives and become what we want everybody to be, which are productive, law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, how, but I think I'm going to ask you why. In 2014, you were named Prosecutor of the Year. You've served on boards of, like, the Missouri Prosecuting Attorneys Association, board member, executive committee member for the National District Attorneys Association. Plus, you run an office of, 15 lawyers. You're a Duke Law grad. Probably had a ton of opportunities. And I think you told me last night when we were chatting that you weren't an assistant. You didn't prosecute before this. So I was going to ask you, how do you do it all? But obviously, you can get it done. Like, why?
Yeah. So it's a really great question, Kurt. So I had no idea that I was ever going to be a prosecutor. I went to law school thinking I was going to be a big-time corporate lawyer, joined an international law firm, did business litigation for 7 years, frankly, was in my partnership year and had been assured, oh, you're a lock to make partner. And just so happened that a friend of mine who at the time happened to be a prosecutor in another Kansas City metro area said, look, I've got a conflict case. Would you mind coming down and prosecuting the case for me? And I said, sort of on a lark, I said, yeah, my firm wants me to do some pro bono time. I'll come down and do that. Well, to make a long story short, that ended up being a child sexual abuse case. We convicted the person who did it, and I got to sit in a room with, at the time, a girl who was probably 10, 11 years old and say, look, because you had the courage to come forward, this guy's not going to be able to hurt you. He's not going to be able to hurt anybody ever again. And I got in the car after that meeting, and I called my wife, and I said, you know what? I think I just had the best day I've ever had practicing law. And then the opportunity came to run for prosecutor. So I gave up partnership in that big international law firm, and the rest is history. And again, I just feel so fortunate. I tell people all the time, it's the greatest professional honor that I've had in my career to serve as their prosecutor in court, and I also consider it a really solemn responsibility.
Well, obviously, you do a great job if you've been elected for six consecutive terms. You know, I was a prosecutor for a long time too, not elected, but I have to agree, at the risk of what I do right now, it's the best job I ever had. Hardest, like you said, most solemn, but also the most discouraging and most rewarding at the same time.
Absolutely.
So as a prosecutor who protects families, gives voices to victims, and do you have a focus on what you prosecute? Because not the crimes, but like what your philosophy is, I guess, because we're going to get into, I guess, opposing philosophies. Like, what is that? Like, what drives you?
So I tell assistant prosecutors every day that their job is first and foremost just to do the right thing, to do justice. And what does that mean? I think it means this. In so many cases, it means separating the dangerous people who, frankly, do need to go to prison from the fundamentally good people who have made a mistake and need to be held accountable for that mistake, but who oftentimes something other than prison can redirect their lives and set them on the right path. And the fact of the matter is, we deal with a lot of dangerous people, but we deal with a far greater number of people who are at their core good citizens, but sometimes because of mental health issues, other times because of addiction issues, sometimes just because they've made a stupid mistake.
Felony stupid, we used to call it, huh?
Exactly. Need an intervention, but that intervention might not be prison time.
I think it's difficult, but what you're telling me, when you're prosecuting cases and your office is, and when I say you, I mean your office, how you direct your assistants, do you consider, which I think a lot of people don't, but I think the attitude is changing. Do you consider the collateral consequences? Like you said, we've got to hold people accountable, but when you have a file sitting on your desk, is there consideration to what prosecuting this person or what the resolution of this case is going to do to that person and their family and extended family in the long run?
Yeah, the ultimate goal is to make society better, to make it safer. And so I think you've got to consider what your prosecution is going to do overall in that regard. You know, there's been one study that has shown that a first-time non-violent felony conviction will reduce a person's overall income by 40% for the rest of their lives, right? And so that first conviction for a non-violent crime is going to have a significant negative outcome, not only on that offender himself or herself, but on their family, and it spreads out to all of society. Because again, what we want as a society is for folks to be healthy, happy, productive members of our communities.
So tell me then, since 2002, I'm sure that your office has grown, your views and I guess policies or I guess directives have kind of changed based on what you've seen. And it appears Platte County is kind of a leader in a few things. And specifically, I want to talk about a program that I read about called the CARES program. I want to get it right. CARES stands for
Yeah.
Community Alternative with Restorative and Educational Services. I like CARES better.
You got it. I like CARES better too, so it's a mouthful. Yep, Platte Community Alternative with Restorative and Educational Services. That's a real mouthful. But Platte CARES is a prosecutor-led diversion program that we set up about 3 years ago now. In our county. Look, we've done diversion for a long time. Diversion is essentially a prosecutor saying, look, we will not prosecute your crime if you'll agree to do a few certain things, usually remain crime-free, maybe do some community service, things like that. And we had done that for a long, long time. But I'll be honest with you, Kurt, we hadn't done a great job of it. We weren't following up with folks very well. We didn't have any real services that we were providing them. And I decided it was time that if we were going to continue to do diversion, which I thought we needed to do in the right cases, we needed to make it a real robust program. And so we hired a former probation and parole officer from Missouri who actually had been working in our drug treatment courts, and brought him into the program. He serves as our program coordinator. And at this point, we're going to be coming up soon on our 250th graduate from the program in just 3 years. And here's what we do. We take people, again, first-time nonviolent offenders. So this isn't a program for folks who we think are dangerous, who we think could be real threats to the community.
So does that apply? First-time nonviolent offenders. So everybody, the first thing that comes to their mind is drugs. A lot of
Mhm.
people, drugs and addicted, but does it include other felonies like thefts or felony shoplifting or whatever it may be? So
It
it's not
absolutely does,
okay
and frankly, most of our drug offenders we're trying to put into another program in our county that I'll talk about in a little bit, which are our treatment courts. Um, because our CARES program is not a treatment program. We can do some drug education, but we just don't have the resources at this point, at least, to be a treatment program. And frankly, we've got those resources in our drug courts.
elsewhere.
Yeah, and so folks who have addiction problems need to be in our drug treatment courts. But this is for all of those other sorts of crimes, stealing, things like that, and it can be misdemeanor or felony offenders. And frankly, you can have if you're in our felony track program, you can have committed prior misdemeanors. But if it's your first felony, we'll consider you for the CARES program. And so here's what we ask folks in the CARES program to do. We ask them first to admit their wrongdoing. We think it's important that you understand and you admit that you made a mistake, that you did something wrong. Secondly, you're going to provide community service. You're going to give back to your community, doing hours and hours of community service, sort of repaying the community for the wrong that you did. Third, you're going to either get a job if you don't have one, keep a job if you already do, or continue your education. Do things to be a productive member of society. Fourth, if there's restitution to be made, we require folks to make restitution. Fifth, you're going to be involved in, if it's appropriate, a restorative justice session where we'll put the defendant in the same room as a victim with a number of other members of our community, and where appropriate, have a conversation between those folks. We don't do that in every case, but we do it in the right case. And then finally, in every single case, we have offenders do an educational project that is related directly to their crime. For example, if they were shoplifting, we've got a course on how shoplifting affects folks. If it's a financial crime, we've got things on how to budget better and how to be better with your money so you're not committing these sorts of crimes. All sorts of different courses for folks, and everybody does one of those things. If you'll do all of those things, we will, if we've already charged a case, we'll dismiss it. If the case hasn't been charged, it won't be charged. And you'll be given this chance, again, to be held accountable, but to re-enter society without that criminal history that can be so detrimental to so many people. The goal of the program, really, Kurt, is threefold. To reduce caseloads for our courts. Our courts are overburdened. That's true of courts all across the United States, but Platte County is the fastest growing county in Missouri. Our courts are understaffed and have too many caseloads.
Like everywhere, huh?
Yeah. Secondly, we're trying to reduce the incarceration rate in our jail and ultimately in prisons. And then thirdly, lower recidivism, because what we found is that nationwide, these sorts of programs can decrease recidivism. The chances of getting a second or third or fourth crime on your record greatly increase after you have that first one.
Yeah, I'm sure. And if your 250 graduates, congratulations, are able to work and able to find a place to live, it just gives them, not only the benefit of being held accountable, the benefit of maybe not having a felony, but helps them move forward with their life too, and maybe learn some skills. So it's fascinating that this was a program developed completely within the prosecutor's office, right? I mean,
Yes.
It wasn't police, it wasn't courts, you're like, hey, we can do this with these certain cases. But you're not ignoring those cases, right?
Right.
So tell me the difference, which I think is very innovative, between that and you had mentioned something about, and I'll say it out loud, whether you want me to or not, Jackson County, which is also part of Kansas City,
Yep.
right? And some policies there or some, I guess, policies that just totally preclude the prosecution of certain classes of crimes.
Yeah.
Explain that, and how is what you're doing different?
Yeah. So I do think it's wrong for a prosecutor to carte blanche say, we're not going to prosecute this whole class of crimes. The job of the legislature is to determine what's legal and what's illegal. I take an oath, like every prosecutor, to enforce the laws of the state of Missouri. And those laws are properly instituted by another branch, our legislative branch. And so my job is to enforce those laws, not to make those laws. So I think where prosecutors say we're not going to prosecute this whole class of crimes, that's a real problem. It's a threat to the separation of powers. And
That little thing called the Constitution.
yeah, which is really, really important, right? We take an oath to uphold that
Right.
as well. And I think failing to do that is a real threat to our democracy. Now, what I do think prosecutors can and should do every day is look at cases individually and decide what's the best intervention in this case. And look, I've got a reputation in the Kansas City area for being a very hard-charging prosecutor, and I am when it comes to violent sexual crimes. But there are other crimes where we can do something else. But here's the other thing that I do. We're going to prosecute drug crimes in Platte County. Jackson County, a couple of years ago, asked the Kansas City Police Department not to send to their office any drug crimes unless they could show one of two things: either a direct connection to violence or community outcry. Yeah.
Community outcry.
Yeah.
Someone's mad that somebody was using drugs.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
calling them up, going,
Yeah.
"Hey, prosecute that guy."
Yeah, exactly. I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Sounds good.
After Jackson County asked Kansas City to do that, my colleague just to the east, the Clay County prosecutor, another suburban county, for both of us, about half of our population are residents of the city of Kansas City. We told the Kansas City Police Department, look, do what you will in Jackson County, but in Platte and Clay County, we want those cases. And here's why we want those cases, because I believe that prosecution of drug cases is frankly violence interruption, that we need those cases before they spiral into violence, because we did the work in Platte County. Here's what we found out. 75% of our violent crimes, our homicides, our assaults, our robberies, 75% of our violent crimes were related to drugs in some way, either because the offender was on drugs at the time that he committed the crime, had a documented drug history, or the crime played out during a drug deal. 75% of our violent crimes are related to drugs. We're a whole lot better off if we're intervening in those situations before those crimes become violent rather than after.
Yeah, and that's something you're never going to have statistics on, right?
Right.
You're prosecuting these drug cases, or maybe even sending them to the drug court where they're not ending up with felonies, maybe getting them treatment. You're never going to have the statistics that say, because we did this here, this violent crime didn't take place. It sounds like Jackson County's going, wait till the violence happens, then we'll handle it.
That's exactly what they're doing, and I think it's a real problem. Kansas City, sadly, is a violent city. Most of that violence, frankly, is happening in the Jackson County portion of Kansas City. And I'll tell you, I think that policy is wrong. I think it's contributing to the violence, and that's why I spoke out against it.
Just no accountability.
Right.
So we were talking about drugs, and I mentioned something about the drug courts. You also, in Platte County, have a number of, I'll call them specialized court, a drug court, a DUI court, a veterans court. I think I'm missing one.
A mental health court.
Mental health court. I presume, without getting into too much detail, these courts take people in that situation and try to direct them in a different direction. Do they end up with felonies there, or can they get out of the felonies if they do certain treatments? How do they work?
Yeah, in many situations they can get out of the court if they successfully complete all that we're asking them to do, and it's a lot. I'm going to tell you, Kurt, it's not an easy road for the folks who run these treatment courts. We ask a lot from them in terms of addressing their underlying substance abuse or mental health problems. But if they'll do those things, in many situations, we'll let folks out without giving them a felony, because what we're doing in those courts is addressing the underlying cause of their criminal behavior. And of course, one of the problems, if you say that you're not going to prosecute drug cases, is you don't have any way to feed those drug courts and to take care of those problems before they become violent. And so again, I think prosecuting drug cases and using drug courts in the right situation is the right way to handle those crimes. Again, holding people accountable, but doing it in a way that ultimately improves public safety, and not waiting until violence breaks out to intervene.
So I'm an elected prosecutor, let's say, which I'm not. Never had the guts that you had, so kudos. In a county in Arizona, county in Texas, whatever, and I see the CARES program, and I see these specialized courts that are operating in Platte County. I don't have anything like that. Tell someone who's watching, like, how do you develop those? How do you get, I imagine with the courts have to have buy-in. And I have arguments with the courts in Arizona over printing off a certificate because they don't have enough toner, right? So what's the process of getting the courts to buy into this too? Because it's really a collaboration at this point, right?
Yep. A diversion program a prosecutor can really do on their own. Treatment courts, you've got to have the courts involved, and you've got to have buy-in really from not only the prosecutor, the courts, but also from community providers who are going to provide drug treatment, things like that, and the defense bar as well. You've got to have a whole team of folks who are willing to do it, and so it takes. Oftentimes, the prosecutor is the one person who's talking to all of those folks every single day. So the prosecutor has the bully pulpit to try to drive those courts into existence, and that's what a prosecutor's got to do, is bring these people to the table. Again, because what we're talking about doing is something that ultimately is in the best interests of public safety. And that's what prosecutors are all about. All of us are there to try to protect the public. And in my opinion, you've got to have all of the different parts of the arsenal in at your disposal. You've got to have prison time for the folks who need to go to prison. You need to have treatment courts. You need to have diversion programs. You've got to have hopefully good probation services, which a prosecutor can't control directly, but hopefully the state's doing a good job with those things. And so you've got to have every tool at your disposal so that you can bring out the right thing in the right case.
So you're elected 6 times. You do a number of innovative things. You distinguish Platte County from Jackson County, who doesn't prosecute certain classes of crimes. How do you sell that to the voter? Like, how do you stay in office so you can continue? Obviously, you figure it out, but so you can continue to do these things, and you're like, this is what's best for the community and why? Because voters aren't going to look at a statistic. Some might, but most aren't. They're going to go on X or TikTok, and usually that shows the one bad thing that happened. So, like, how do you convey it to the public and say this is better for our community?
Yeah, I think I've been fortunate in that I've done it for a long time, and I did develop a reputation for being a pretty hard charging prosecutor, and I welcome that reputation because I am when it comes to violent and sexual offenses. But I think once you've got the community convinced that you're going to do everything you can do to keep them safe from really dangerous people, they'll also understand that there are different interventions for good folks who've made a mistake, because everybody's got in their family that fundamentally good person, but who's messed up in some way. And if it's not a family member, it's a friend or somebody else who's gotten involved with the criminal justice system, who they say, well, that person, they kind of deserve a break, right? And we can do that. Again, we're not letting them off scot-free. We're holding them accountable, but we're using different interventions to hold people accountable other than just prison time. Prison time's appropriate for dangerous folks. It's not appropriate for everybody.
So 6 elections. Is there going to be a 7th and an 8th, and you're going to continue to do it? Looks like you love getting up every morning to go to your job.
I do love my job. I tell people all the time, if the right opportunity came along at the right time, sure, I'd consider it. But I will tell you this, Kurt, I absolutely love what I'm doing at this point. I'm sure as heck planning on running for a 7th term if the voters will have me.
Well, the people of Platte County are lucky to have you. We're probably getting towards the end. I would talk to you for hours about this stuff because we've had conversations elsewhere too. But before we end, I want to ask you something really, really important kind of to me. I want you to explain the Eric Zahnd money back guarantee.
So here's the Eric Zahnd money back guarantee for certain things, certain books, certain movies that I know are really great. I will tell somebody, if you'll go watch that movie, if you'll buy that book, if you don't like it, I'll give you your money back. And I think I made that promise to you with the book. I don't know whether you've read it yet, but if you don't like it, Kurt, your money's coming back.
The Pilgrim. Is it The Pilgrim?
I Am Pilgrim.
I Am Pilgrim. I'm on section 2. It's with me in my luggage here in Austin. I bought the biggest hardback, most expensive book I could off Amazon with that money back guarantee, in the back of my mind. So far, so good. I wish I were done with it. I wanted to tell you how much I liked it today, but I haven't quite gotten there yet. It's a big book, and it's got small words. It takes me a little while.
It is a big book, but I think you're going to like it. But if not, you get your money back.
Well, it's fantastic. Eric, before we go, I want to thank you again for coming to Austin to do this. How can people find out more about you? I know you have a website, and Platte County probably has a website, but could you tell them how to look you up?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can go to ericzahnd.com. That's ERICZAHND.com. They can go to the Platte County website as well. That's Platte County, Missouri. They can find things there about me. And I want people to always feel free to call too. The office number is 816-858-3476. And so if somebody's watching this podcast and they're interested in reaching out, they can call that number. They can also, my emails all over the internet as well. I welcome, whether it's other prosecutors or just members of a community who are interested in what we're doing in Platte County. And look, I'm not going to claim that what we're doing in Platte County is absolutely unique. There are good prosecutors all over the United States who are doing things like this. But we're better when we're sharing with one another what works in our communities. And I'm happy to do that with anybody, anytime.
Well, I will attest that you are easy to get a hold of, and you're very helpful. You've helped me. So hopefully people will do that. Prosecutors will do that. And I want to thank everybody for joining us on the Right on Crime podcast. To reach out to our team, you can find us at www.rightoncrime.com. That's www.rightoncrime.com. And Eric, thanks again for being here. Hopefully some folks are going to watch this, going to reach out and say, hey, this is what happens in our community. Can you help me get something together? So appreciate you sharing. Appreciate what you do, man. It's pretty awesome. So thanks for being here.